Hello and welcome to another Vegan Interactions Live. So, in the next hour or so, we're going to be covering the moral questions surrounding animal use, specifically through a Christian lens, as well as looking at some of the nutritional science around this. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thanks to my Save Ralph reaction video. I'm glad that a lot of you have been able to find this channel. So if you're joining us through that, please make yourself at home. And yeah, I'm quite excited because this is the first live stream where I will be joined by a real life wolf. So the special guest who will be helping me unpack this all is Troy. Welcome to the live stream, Troy.
Hi there, Jeremy.
So yeah, seriously. So Troy wanted to do audio only, so this is a good medium. So we're gonna do it
I'm
like
getting a
this.
bit of
So having a bit of fun, yeah.
I'm getting a bit of feedback. I'm not sure why, but I'm hearing this twice, so I've got a bit
If
of
you
a
do have
technical
the
issue
you
at the moment.
if you do have the YouTube open, if you close YouTube and just listen here, that might be doing it.
Okay, let's have a look at that.
But yeah, while Troy's doing that, I mean, just to bring everyone up to speed, Troy runs, I guess, a critical veganism YouTube channel. I don't know if some might call it anti-vegan. Maybe Troy can frame it better than I can, but basically just analyzing some of the developments. And so that's called Vegan Vacancy, and that's how we actually met. So we were having a discussion in the comments, and I'm trying more and more now to try to pull these things from text-based comment sections to live streams, just because I think they're a lot more productive. And Troy was kind enough to take me up on my offer. So that's kind of how this got started. So is that better with the audio on your end now?
Yeah, I think I've switched the audio off the YouTube, so yeah, we're good to go now.
Yeah, and it'll be like a 10-second delay too. So, yeah, because you said this is actually your first live stream, so I appreciate you taking the step to come on here.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. Yes, it's another experience.
All have to get closer and closer to technology these days, don't we? During the apocalypse.
Yes. Well, yeah, it's something to do, isn't it? But although there are other things to do that aren't getting done.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, or it's always a prioritization, isn't it? Because I think just as a bit of a icebreaker, I saw you commented on my Ralph reaction video. I suspect a few people joining us may have come to the channel through that. So real quickly, did you have any thoughts on the Save Ralph video itself when you first watched it?
Oh yeah, I mean it's the use of animals for um, even medical. I don't agree with, certainly not cosmetics. I think the use testing on animals for cosmetics is absolutely appalling. Um, and even well, from a Christian perspective, I wouldn't even particularly think that it's justifiable on medical reasons, to be honest, because you think, well, what are you doing really? You're just patching people up. Um, and I mean, we're all gonna die anyway. And so you say, are we going to try to extend people's lives at the cost of all this suffering? Um, because I mean, it's like you've got this problem with an aging population, and I've spent some time in care homes visiting, and there are a lot of elderly people, and they're suffering from dementia, all sorts of ailments. And you think, yes, they're going to live longer. They're going to be medicated now for maybe another 5, 10 years, but they haven't got any quality of life. They're just spending
Hmm.
all day in a room watching TV and being fed. And you think, but all those medications have been tested on animals to give people an extended life, but no extra quality. Um,
That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, and just real quickly, welcome to Carolyn. And if you are joining us, do let us know you're here in the chat. We will pull in comments as we can. But really, the question, I guess, because to that point, I guess a big question that we've had kind of in our dialogue before this is just kind of, I guess, veganism in general and how do we do it? And I guess the first question that we're kind of talking a little bit about before we went live is have you considered veganism for yourself?
well, yes, I wouldn't say over the years. How am I going to phrase this? No, I'm not going to use the term veganism because I know that it's quite a sensitive term. It's become more of a sensitive term now. There's always I would say, did I consider going whole foods plant based? So did I consider an entirely plant based diet? Yes, but I didn't do that. Didn't come to that via YouTube or the Cube of Truth or any influences. I just drifted towards it over many years. As I learned to cook, and I quite enjoyed flavors and flavorful sauces, I thought, well, the animal produce in this is it becoming less relevant to a point once where I made a stir fry and put some prawns in and thought I would prefer this without the prawns, just on a taste, just on the basis of taste. So I knew how to do curries and pasta sauces and stir fries and chilies, and slowly the animal produce got less and less important. And I never ate very much, as I said before the chat started, that I never really ate that much beef, eggs, or oily fish. It was always kind of chicken, maybe prawns, um, and that was it. Really. Oh yeah, chicken, prawns, and a few eggs, but not a vast amount of animal produce. And but cheese, yes, cheese. So I like my cheese, and I like milk in tea. One reason why I could never
Oh,
go
that's an
vegan.
English thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely, that was a nightmare trying to find a plant-based milk that worked in tea. I even went. Oh,
Did you find one in the end that kind of worked
no,
for you?
I went to green tea. I swapped
Oh,
black tea for
okay.
green tea. Yeah,
That's a good way to think outside the box. I mean,
yeah. I didn't enjoy any of the plant milks in the in. But as I say, I drifted towards veganism all on my own, really. And then it the key to it, the catalyst, where I thought, yeah, I'll go entirely plant based, was losing weight. I wanted to lose some weight, and so the animal produce dropped even further. Out went the cheese that I liked. Out went the eggs and the chicken, and all that was left was a bit of mackerel and a bit of cream cheese, and of course my milk and my tea. And the
okay.
diet went really well. The diet went really well, and then before it was 4 months, it went very well. I got to my target weight. And the next 5 months, I was thinking, well, what do I do? I want to eat more food. I don't want and never want to do another diet. So I want to keep my weight stable. So I thought, well, why not just increase the foods you've been eating? But then I thought, well, why not take this opportunity as the animal produce is so little to just kick it out altogether? And then I thought, right, I'm entirely plant based. I'll go entirely plant based now. It's not that difficult. It's kind of crept up on me over the years, and I've got to the lowest point ever. I'm not attached to any of the foods I gave. I gave up loads of foods from my diet, all the kind of processed foods and sweet foods, pastries and pizzas and bacon even. Not that I ever used to eat all that much bacon either. And it wasn't difficult. It wasn't difficult in terms of food or taste even. I quite enjoyed the my my diet. The food I was eating on my diet, there wasn't very much of it, but it was tasty. I had no problem. It was never a taste buds issue. I've had that thrown at me so often. It's quite funny because I thought I gave up so much without any problem from my diet. It's not a taste buds issue. I've never gone back to. Well, I did go back to pizza because there was a special offer, but I didn't enjoy them. I didn't enjoy them. I found them salty and horrible. Um,
Yeah,
and it
because
was on.
taste is a big thing, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned. I think it's good that you made the distinction, I guess, between what's commonly referred to as a plant-based or animal-free diet versus kind of wider
Yeah,
animal use. And it's interesting
yeah,
how you're. It sounds like you're coming about this a bit backward, well, differently to what a lot of people, and myself included, usually I think about the dietary aspects first, and then look at wider animal use. Going to aquariums or to probably a more objective term is water prisons. And you mentioned animal testing, so it sounds like you actually oppose animal testing, but it's the dietary that you're kind of
well, I
looking
mean,
at again. So
yeah, well, it's the. I started to research because I mean I've always been opposed to animal testing anyway. So he said again, you'd say, well, there's your cognitive dissonance because you've been eating. You don't want them tested on, but you're going to eat them, which is the usual. I think it was Vegan Booty who said that firefighters were hypocrites because they'll save a dog and then go back to the station and eat a chicken curry or something like that. Which you say, well, they yeah, so it is the usual thing, the usual accusation in a way that you're a hypocrite if you want to save some animals or you're against the use of some animals, but you're willing to eat others. But I would say on that front, I would say that diet is a different matter. You don't. It's for nutrition. I don't think you can compare it to something like racism or sexism because you don't. Giving up racism or sexism doesn't affect your health. Might affect your mood if you want to be if you want to kind of go to a trivial level, but what you put in your mouth, what you eat, does affect your health. You notice it. So I noticed when I started to research the plant-based diet and thought maybe the non-vegans have a point. Maybe, as I said to you before the chat, what I felt I had some of the symptoms that they were describing because I've always been fairly low animal product and I've always had unsettled digestion. I just thought it was me. I always had a bit of bloating and gas and indigestion.
There's typically more fiber. So, I
Yeah.
mean, initially, I think the body does. I think anytime we change up, there is a dietary shift to that. And real quickly, welcome to Fabian and anybody else who joins us. Please do let us know you're here. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that? You mentioned kind of. I mean, I kind of question about like ask the question if it's morally consistent. I mean, what do you think about that? Trying to respect one species while not the other. I mean, it sounds like we're going to get into the nutritional side of it in a moment. But I mean, do you think while it's obviously maybe it's a gradual process for some, do you think that it'd be more consistent to respect all species of our fellow animals?
Well, I suppose again, it's down to what is our nature. What is our nature? I mean, I'm obviously a carnivore.
As
Well,
a
no, I'm
wolf?
not. Yeah, as a wolf. Yes, this is how I
Yeah.
identify. No, I mean, see, in a way, from a Christian perspective, you what I hear as well, when people try to debunk the religious side of things, you hear everybody immediately chucks Genesis 1:29 at us Christians. That even though they don't believe in the Bible, they say, look, if you look at your belief system, you start with Genesis 1:29, and it says that your God created you to eat the fruit of every seed-bearing plant. And it says that also that the animals were created to eat the herbs. So you say, right, God created the Garden of Eden with perfect people and perfect animals. And it was a vegan garden, the Garden of Vegan, if you like. And so they say, I've heard it said by several people saying, wouldn't it be in line with God's original design to be vegan as a Christian because you were created vegan and you think, well, no, not well. Yes, we were created vegan, but then you say, well, what happened to the animals? If they were created vegan to eat the herbs, then well, they're not all vegan now. They're not all herbivores now. So their nature changed. Something changed their nature. So if the animal's nature changed, then there's nothing to say that the human nature stayed herbivorous. That if I'm an omnivore now as a human, well, that's not doesn't contradict the fact that everything else changed. Everything changed, it seemed, after the fall, and you think, well, what caused the change? But there was change. There's no alligators and lions and tigers and bears in the Garden of Eden. So that the question then is, what changed their nature? Now you think, well,
Well, I guess regardless of the past, I mean, I guess the question is, what can we do today? I mean, that's really the key question. I don't know if we're going to be able to connect too much on the nutritional side of things, but it's possibly worth trying a little bit. I mean, do you think? I guess maybe we should stay on religion first before we move on to that. I mean, as a Christian, do you think while you're making a case for it being consistent to not be a non-vegan, do you think you could also be consistent to be a vegan? Like, do you think it's possible for Christians to be vegan and be consistent with the other belief systems? So
Um,
maybe you think it could be both?
well, again, you have to separate, I think, from a point of view of the biblical teachings, you would have to separate the term vegan from entirely plant-based, because from the Bible, you can't really judge anyone. In the New Testament, it says you can't judge anybody on what they eat. If they eat with according to their conscience, if they eat with thankfulness, if they eat with gratitude for their food, it says you don't judge them on it. So if you look at Romans, I think it's Romans 14:1, beginning of Romans 14, it says that you can eat what you like. You don't have to eat animal products, but you may, and as long as you eat it with a clear conscience, you're good to go, and you shouldn't judge. So say like a meat-eating Christian shouldn't say you can't be entirely plant-based, but it works the other way around as well. So you say now if you're a vegan, then you're saying, well, you should be entirely plant-based, therefore you're judging somebody. So a vegan Christian is quite a dodgy position, because be entirely plant-based, but should you judge someone who isn't? And this is the problem.
Well, would you judge someone who violated another human's rights?
Well, yes, but you see, this is the problem. In the Bible doesn't, um, if you go back to, say, Dr. Melanie Joy and her carnism concept, that it's an invisible belief system, that we look after some animals, we eat others, and we wear some. And she calls it an invisible belief system. But what we have, really, it's not an invisible belief system. It's, in fact, a biblical belief system. The fact that we do eat some animals and not others comes from the Old Testament to start with. That you get to Leviticus 11, and from Mount Sinai, Moses comes down, and God's given him a specific list of animals that people may eat, things like ox and sheep and then chicken, and you can't, I mean, you can't eat pigs actually from Leviticus 11. So you think, right, if you believe the Bible, then you've immediately got your speciesism, if you like, because you're living in a biblical belief system, not an invisible one. It didn't just come about out of a desire to dominate. It's all written down. So you say, right, if I've got Christian faith and I believe, and that comes from the Bible, then I've got the list of animals that I can eat. Now you'd say at that point, you'd say, well, why? If we don't need to eat them, why would God say, yeah, you can eat these? Why wouldn't
Well,
it?
I think bigger picture is probably because to your point. I mean, I think for me to cite Bible verses when it's not necessary. I mean, I was actually raised. I don't think I've told you this yet, but I was raised Presbyterian, so I have some
Okay,
background with it,
sure,
but I'm not necessarily currently practicing, as it were, which we can
right.
get into more if that's helpful. But so I agree. Like I shouldn't be citing Bible verses because I think it could. I think that could be a bit disingenuous if it's not my belief system. But I do kind of question, like, so if we look at big picture wise, like the thou shalt not kill thing, which I know you would have seen you've already seen some of my other discussions around this topic, so you probably know some of these questions are coming. But like, I mean, how do you interpret thou shalt not kill?
Um, well, it definitely only applies to humans. Definitely. I mean, one thing that got me started, the first video I ever made was after I heard the Gary Yourofsky speech. I think it was it Oakland? And he starts off by saying, no religion mandates the eating of animals. And you have to treat others as you'd expect to be treated yourself. Animals are others, and thou shalt not kill. And I thought, and that was his opening case in a way. And I thought, well, it's wrong. It's wrong because
For
in the
such an
same.
important moral question, just real quickly, if I may, for such an important moral question, don't you think they should specify humans if that was the case?
It does, in a sense. Later in the chapter, that's thou shalt not kill is verse 13. And verse 24 says, you will build for me an altar out of earth, and on it you will sacrifice your, it goes on, your wave offerings and your sheep and your oxen. That's pretty clear then. If it's in the same, it's the same chapter, 11 verses later on, it's saying you sacrifice your sheep and your oxen on the altar, then thou shalt not kill clearly doesn't apply, does it? It can't do.
I mean, it wouldn't. I mean, I'm trying to resist the urge to. I don't want to be swapping verses because you're obviously far more knowledgeable on the topic than I am, from a Bible verse perspective. So I'm trying not to go into
Okay.
too much because I appreciate we could spend the
Yeah,
whole hour
yeah.
just on that. But I mean, isn't there a whole lot of things in the Bible that we could use to justify things that could be considered to be immoral, such as slavery?
Now that's a good one, because this is where you get into the territory of kind of progressive Christianity, that the the Bible is of its time, that it's in a way not pure. It's very much influenced, and it has a lot of the teachings in it are reflect the society of the time. That it's definitely a historical document and not fully relevant today. That we've moved on. The argument would be that we've progressed in a lot of ways in terms of inclusivity and rights and democracy and things like that. But then you say, okay, that's a progressive view, but then there might be a problem with that, because you say now I've got to reinterpret everything in terms of modern society, and how much, where do I stop? How much of the Bible do you say no, that's old, that's no longer relevant? Because and that's happened. There's a lot of progressive Christians who really ignore the Bible to a certain extent if they don't like it. I've had Christians who I thought they were Bible believing Christians for years, and then we've had a fairly in-depth conversation. They've said to me, "Well, of course, it's not all true," and you think, "Well, wow. So now, which bits are true and which bits aren't then?" Because you're in deep water then. Because if everybody then can decide for themselves which bits are true and it normally will be in groups. There'll be people that will congregate with people who share the similar beliefs, but then you end up with 1,000 different flavors of Christianity, which you do have. You've got hundreds of different types of denominations, all with slightly different beliefs. Some will go as far as to say that the Old Testament is completely irrelevant now. Others will say that the New Testament needs to be more in line with the progress that society has made over the years for things like inclusivity. Now, so yeah, you've got a point. That's a point. That's a difficult one, but you can get around it without modifying the Bible.
Well, yeah, can get around its interesting wording. So
Well, no,
I guess back to the earlier point, we someone could be vegan and be consistent with wider Christianity, just not necessarily every verse. But that's probably most people probably don't live by every verse. It's
um,
I would. Do
well, no,
you think that's
no.
a
I mean,
fair?
it's but when I say get around it, I mean you can understand the Bible. You can if you take a different perspective on what the Bible's about, you don't really need to modify it. We've changed because we're not really focusing on what the Bible Project was. We've it's more like a human centric, um, a gloss, almost a way of living, a moral code, which obviously vegans will say, well, it doesn't go far enough because it's not moral enough if you're still harming animals. But so the entire focus of the Bible has changed. People don't see it I don't think, from the original project that God had in mind. this isn't an ant farm where he's kind of looking down and say, well, this is my project, these strange little creatures I've built, and I want them to live a certain way. And if they do, I'll reward them, and if they don't, I'll punish them. That's not what the project was. It was much more ambitious than that. And in that sense, you see the world as very much a temporary. This is a temporary situation, and so if there are things that don't look like quite right, it's not. You don't need to have total equality because there's lots of things that will never be equal. You'll never have equal intelligence or wealth. So you say, well, slavery for a start. There are people. It's still around. It's different form now. How many people do terribly boring, repetitive jobs because they're wage slaves, really? Yes,
Well,
nobody's.
even
Sorry.
literal slave. Yeah, sorry if I can just jump in real quick. Even
Yeah,
literal
sure.
slavery. Just Gatwick Airport, a half an hour from here. I understand that they bring people in and out for modern day slavery. Specifically sex trafficking and God knows what else. Well, I
Yeah.
guess I shouldn't say that in this conversation, maybe. But
Oh
like
yes.
as far as equality, like I appreciate when we get into wealth and economic systems and all that. There's a lot to try to address. I mean, just from a basic moral right perspective, respecting, just that not being bred, used, or killed. Don't you think we should strive to have that? Let's starting with humans, to your point, but then obviously we can talk about how it relates to our fellow animals.
Well, yeah, but this is the problem. Then does go back to nutrition because if we are omnivores and we fare better, perhaps we can survive. Well, we can. We know that humans can survive for a long time on terrible diets. From We know that from the Second World War with Japanese prisoners of war, the Jews. A lot of them survived in those terrible conditions. On A lot didn't, obviously, but a lot survived on some survived, and although they were almost death's door for years on dreadful diets. But then you say, at what point, if you say, well, you could survive reasonably well without animal products, at what point, how much of your health, what price is you have to pay? How much of a sacrifice do you have to make? That's the question, really. If there is a price to be paid for cutting out animal produce altogether, how big a price is it right to have to pay? Because then you get back into the ex-vegans who say, well, my health actually did suffer, and yeah, some vegans will say, well, they just did it wrong, or they weren't committed, or they were never vegan. But is it true? Is that right? Is there enough evidence to say that they didn't do it properly, or if the health did suffer, yeah, obviously they survived it, but how big a sacrifice is expected? If it's very little, then you'd say, okay, yeah, um, maybe you should give it up. But if it's significant, then where's the cutoff point?
Well, I think a key distinction there, and I think before we completely go into nutrition, I just want to ask one more thing when it comes to
Yeah.
religion. And I appreciate to each individual their own religion is a unique thing.
Hmm.
And for you yourself, like, I mean, would the idea of God creating our fellow animals with the ability to lead a net negative life through pain, suffering, however we want to frame it, but ultimately to have a negative existence,
Yeah.
does it follow for someone, a God to do that, for us to then breed, use, and kill them?
Well, that you have to see the whole. There's a different perspective, which is really from God's. Well, as I understand the Bible and the Bible Project, from God's perspective, everything that takes place on Earth, and that, well, the whole of the human race from the beginning to the end, it doesn't take very long. From his perspective, it's a very short period. There's a the real game, the real project is an eternal project. So God can restore everything that suffers and has a terrible life. To him, it's relatively short. It doesn't mean that suffering is not real, but everything can be restored and will be restored. for an eternal paradise. So that's the Bible project. So it didn't go wrong. It's just that people rejected it. The reason why we've got the problems at the moment is because mankind rejected God in the Garden of Eden. That's what the story is in Genesis 3. You say, do you challenge God or do you accept him? And we've got the same situation now. And you say, okay, I can't accept that there is a God because of the suffering, but you say, no, it'll all be put right. I know it's real and it's horrible, but it does get put right because it's an enormously big eternal project where the physical temporal phase is relatively short. The whole of human history, from God's perspective, is relatively short.
And from a human-centric perspective, sure. And I guess I'm just thinking more so just the to me what I think of a God embodying the idea to create someone that can have these overwhelmingly negative experiences. Speaking specifically of animals who are not human, the idea that they would be created with with their purpose to be, you know, used and killed.
No, it wasn't
I
the
just I have
purpose.
trouble. I have trouble reconciling that. Why would someone create? I mean, why? Why? I mean, aren't we talking more about plants? Like, doesn't that make more sense to create plants for us to? I appreciate we can get into nutrition because that's a sweeping statement, but
Well, I think the thing is, it all starts. We do have the Garden of Eden, which is everything is created. There's no suffering, there's no killing. Obviously, it is a vegan garden. But what messes it up? But it actually doesn't. Yeah, what messes it up is the rejection of God. He doesn't hasn't created everything for us to abuse, but he temporarily allows it. Just as like people, a lot of people have suffered. Humans have suffered terribly at the hands of other humans. Now you'd say, well, why does God allow it? I mean, you have people like Richard Dawkins who says that it's absolutely outrageous that people would believe in a God who would allow illness like sickness in children who born have painful short lives and die in agony. And he says it's an absolute disgrace that God would tolerate that in the first place. And you go, yeah, it's horrible. So why, how can you reconcile that? And you say you reconcile that through the fact that it will all be put right, and that it's from God's perspective, it's a very relatively short period of time. For instance, if we're going to have an eternal life, which is the project, we might get into that. It's very short to explain, but the first billion years of eternal life. So let's take the first billion years of eternal life, which is a bit silly to talk about time in terms of eternal life because it's steady state. But there you go. Compress the first billion years into 1 year. A human life of 80 years, then relatively, well, in proportion, lasts 2.5 seconds, which is just about enough time to say yes or no to eternal life. So that's God's perspective. So we say, oh, this is misery. This is a horrible place of suffering for animals, for people. There can't be a God. But God says, no, you can choose to have your eternal life and everything will be put right. Everything gets put right. The project was to offer everybody eternal life. Now, if you're an animal or a small child who can't make that decision, they can't make a decision to accept or reject God, well, you're going to get a free pass. So any suffering, anybody who suffers unjustly gets a free pass, and they've got eternal life to look forward to. So you have to that's the perspective that you have to look at it as, because you
well, and I
can't.
guess
We're not. Go on. Sorry.
oh no, that's okay. It's just a because it's kind of two different things to me. The whole concept of a young child getting an illness versus a human on human committing what I think would be widely considered an unjust act.
Yeah.
I think human on human violence. Surely that wasn't the intention. Which
No.
I guess from an animal rights perspective, I would argue the same. It's not the intention, you know, to breed, use, and kill our fellow animals either.
But what we've done, if we're not doing it out of, if it is natural for us to be, if our nature did change to make us omnivorous and they do provide a nutritional benefit, then it's not being done out of malice. It's being done out of necessity. I remember watching an Earthling Ed video about God says we may eat animals, and he was saying in the time of Muhammad and Jesus, perhaps it was necessary. It may have been necessary to eat animals because there wasn't the abundance of food then. And you go, well, that's a strange thing to say from a vegan, because now that exploitation, well, anything to do with food is being described as rape, torture, murder, exploitation. And then you say, well, and then someone like Earthling Ed says, well, in the time of Muhammad and Jesus, it may have been necessary. You'll say, well, so at some point it was expedient and okay to rape, torture, murder, exploit, but it's no longer necessary. That's a strange argument. And then you say, well, okay, go on, sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. I was just gonna bring in a comment that I think will bring us onto the health side of things. That is interesting though, because I think in reality we don't know what happened. I mean, even going back, I mean, we're talking about you were talking about the wars just a bit ago and the lack of nutrition during those times. Even, I think we still won't know the full extent of things even 70 or 100 years ago, let alone going back 1,000, 2,000 plus years ago. So yeah, I'd be reluctant to make any claim one way or the other around this should have been or shouldn't,
Yeah, so but it's strange to hear someone like Ed say that, because you say, well, okay, if it may have been necessary then, you say, well, when wasn't it? When didn't it become necessary? Because things didn't change a lot in the 1,000 years after Muhammad, from around 600 AD to 1600. Science hadn't changed much, and we still didn't have a rapid integrated global transport system that could ship in, that could fly in exotic plant produce to anywhere from anywhere. So you're looking, that abundance of year-round plant produce is very recent. Even 100 years ago, it was. Even when I grew up, there wasn't. It was all mainly local produce. When I was born in 1960, and I remember the 60s. There weren't sophisticated years in terms of what we've got now. I think I was around when the first supermarket appeared in my town. Before that, it was local shopping. So you didn't go around and you weren't picking Sharon fruit and exotic star fruit and things like that. And jackfruit. I was quite fascinated when I saw the size of jackfruit.
I used to live in Singapore, so yeah, they're big enough so you can they're massive. So, I mean, half a human body basically. Some of the big ones.
The first time I saw someone with the jackfruit, I thought, wow, tiny people.
Well, it's the other way around, big fruit. Well, yeah, and just to welcome to Kat and Laura and everybody else who has joined us. I think Fabian says you're a very old wolf.
Yes, I am.
No wolf ageism meant to happen here.
No,
didn't know wolves could live that long.
It may be a record.
Should contact Guinness.
Yeah.
Well, and Kat's just saying, and this is similar to my experience because I'm also around the 7-year mark. So maybe we could dive, we're maybe about halfway through here. Maybe we could dive into the nutrition side of things a little bit. I mean, how do you explain individuals like myself and Kat who have had, I like to focus on just the baseline, don't need to eat or use our fellow animals versus it necessarily being if it is good for us, I consider that a bonus.
Right.
I mean, do you think it's a biological requirement for us to filter plants through other animals?
Well, just looking at when I did come across the ex-vegans, and I thought, well, on very low animal produce, I've got some of the same conditions, and then I thought, well, let me do the objective test and go whole foods diet, but relatively high in what seemed to be the highly nutritious food, which I researched as well, and go, let's base it on red meat, so beef, eggs, oily fish, fruit and vegetables. Very simple, and sourdough bread and my tea with my milk in, of course, and my cheese, of course. And and see how we go. Just do an objective test, a whole foods diet, not a standard American diet, and see how I react to it. And there was a significant improvement, far greater than I was expecting. I did all the issues I thought were just my particular digestion. It was just me. It was just my metabolism. I thought, wow, I've got to 59 years old thinking I'm, I've just got this unsettled digestion and it's me. And I've always been fairly nervous and anxious. Um, and suddenly I'm eating the most animal produce I've ever done in a whole foods diet. And the issues did go away. Just like a lot of vegans will say, it's not true. That's not the ex-vegans. That's not how it works. We don't need animal produce now. Okay, you say, well, I got to 59 without. Well, I'd never gave them up altogether, but you say I could go back to that. I suppose I don't know exactly whether it would be worse if I absolutely gave up all animal produce, but I know that at the moment, I show up every day feeling a lot better than I used to when I was on very low animal produce. So again, I don't know exactly the nutritional. I'm not a nutritionist, obviously, but
Nor am
that's
I.
just
So,
no, that's just my experience. So it goes back to the
mm,
question. From my experience, I'm far better. I have a far better um, digestion. I sleep better. I don't sweat as much. My skin isn't as sensitive to sunlight. Um, I'm less fatigued. I'm not yawning all the time. And you say, right, that's so I'm doing better on
well,
with
yeah, I was just gonna say, you mentioned that you've taught in the sciences before, and you kind of value the scientific method and objective
yeah.
data and all that. I just can't help but wonder, listening to your experience, which I'm certainly not, here to say that didn't happen because that's your experience, and I wouldn't want to take away from that. However, I would ask from an objective perspective. I mean, wouldn't seeing a vegan friendly dietitian, getting blood tests, and these types of things, and maybe even getting like a meal plan and looking at, as you say, neither of us is a dietitian, but looking at nutrients and saying, oh, maybe these are the levels that I'm missing.
Well, I mean, I did. The reason I kind of didn't go entirely plant based is because I did do the research. I looked at nutrients, and I spent a lot of time. I looked at the vegan doctors. I was all over YouTube looking at research and different opinions and cholesterol and fat, and um, I didn't find anything. I didn't find anything that would make me think that um, the plant based. I didn't find any evidence that a plant based diet was actually a positive thing. It was better than the standard American, yes. So in that way, it's positive. But I didn't find anything to say that it was better than or anything to say that it was any research that made me think that animal produce was bad. In fact, I think it was. I was a bit annoyed in a sense that um, Dr. Greger was the first person I heard to say that animal produce was actually bad for you, and I thought I don't think it is. Not in my experience. If you go on your experience and you feel good, I mean, normally if you feel bad, something's wrong. If you feel good, something's right. And if you're doing it if you're saying it the other way around, you say you feel better on animal produce, but it's bad for you. And so when you weren't eating as much animal produce, you felt worse, but you were better. That's like counterintuitive. So
Well, and I don't want to pry too much into your personal health situation. I guess you're fairly anonymous as a wolf right now, but I mean, would you say that I mean, did you do any blood tests or ask a dietitian, hey, here's what's going on? Or
well,
is it
I
more kind
don't.
of self research that kind of pulled you back to this conclusion that we need?
Well, I know how to kind of research topics. I spent a lot of time. Um, I trained to be a physics teacher, and I've never stopped kind of researching it. Whenever I've taken on a project, I go quite deep into it, and I kind of know how to do it. So I know how to. I can read a study. Some of them too well. some of them are too long. I just run out of steam. But I've read some of the studies, and I thought, no, as we talked about before, it's all the comparisons seem to be with the standard American diet. I don't see any of the evidence to say it's animal products are bad per se, and plant products are good. The reversing of the disease isn't evidence against animal produce; it's evidence against the standard American diet.
Well, and I guess that's looking at it from a human-centric perspective, and I guess looking at it from an
Yeah.
animal-centric perspective. If we're going to make a case that yes, we need to breed, use, and kill our fellow animals, to
Mm-hmm.
me, I think we'd need a pretty darn good reason to come to that conclusion. And I mean, I guess we talked about nutritional science earlier, maybe before we went live, but if all the major dietetics associations say it's perfectly acceptable at all stages of life, I mean, what's the evidence to say that that conclusion is incomplete? Because I'd look at the other way around versus keep breeding, using, and killing them because we're not sure. I'd be more in the camp of we should oppose this if we're not sure. You know what I mean?
Well, I think you then have to go slightly. What we talked about before was the influence of the Seventh Day Adventists in dietetics. Um, so there is a strong religious, uh, sectarian religious influence in the ADA, which is still there, and also the fact that the the dietitians or the dietetics associations are now in line with politics. So you think there's a coincidence, which I don't like, that animals are now, especially the farm animals, are now responsible. The gassy cows are destroying the planet. And I don't like the coincidence that suddenly we've got a huge push because veganism isn't. I don't believe veganism is a ground up movement. I think it's being pushed because it absolutely matches the gassy cows agenda of we've got to save the planet. So I mean, Biden recently, only a couple of days ago, I think, was it even announced that 90% of beef has got to go by 2030. Now that's because of the climate emergency. So that's a bit of a coincidence that suddenly we've got all the dietetics associations saying now it's animal products are bad for you at the same time as you've got the climate emergency saying animal products are destroying the environment. I don't like that coincidence. And I say because
Coincidence isn't conclusion, though, is it? I mean, well, and just real quickly, if I can make a language point, I mean, you mentioned beef. I mean, do you think it's interesting that we use euphemisms to distance ourselves from the victims? I mean, why aren't we calling them a cow or an individual? Because I think in our previous chat on your YouTube channel, we agreed. It sounds like we both agree that our fellow animals are unique individuals. Do you think
well,
those
yeah,
euphemisms like beef are used and bacon and all this are used to distance ourselves?
um, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it seems that it has to some people because you hear of people who are shown maybe they see that the first time they see the cube of truth, they 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 say, "Oh my goodness, I've been lied to. I never realised that this is where those bits of animal on the supermarket shelves came from." So they race home and launch the fridge off the 10th floor balcony and say, "I'm never going to eat any meat again," and that's it. And they would never. Some people never look at the nutritional side of it. They say, "I'm put off for that's it. I'm vegan. I saw the truth, and that's the end of the matter." But yeah, animals are unique, but we're not going to. You can't clear up the mess, unfortunately. It doesn't. There's no sorting the mess out of this planet. Now, yes, you can say, let's get rid of animal agriculture. Let's not eat them at all if we can get by. And you might say, yeah, well, we could survive, but I don't think we're going to thrive. And the other part of that, the other half of the political question, it's not just they're not just going to get rid of the um, animal agriculture because for the net zero carbon emissions, they're talking about reducing shipping and the airlines. Well, that cargo is going would be carrying the cargo would be your plant foods as well. So you're not going to end up. If we get rid of animal agriculture, that's not the end of it. Net zero means you're going to get rid of fresh food as well, fresh plant food. It's not going to be a whole foods plant-based diet. Because I
So
think
it sounds like you're skeptical it's better for the environment. Because I guess from my perspective, I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe I can send you information after this because I don't mean to hit you with stats if you haven't seen this before, but you're obviously very well researched, so you might have. But from a conversion ratio perspective, if we're looking at 2 to 20 times the calories that it takes to filter plants through our fellow animals versus eating the plants directly, I mean, regardless of, I think that talking about governments and all this stuff that's certainly a topic in and of itself. But just that on its own, if we agree the conversion ratios are real and it does take 2 to 20 times the amount to filter through versus eating direct, wouldn't that use more land, more water, and obviously there's the moral impact on our fellow animals? I mean, doesn't that kind of make sense that it's worse for the environment?
no, I don't think it is.
No?
I think no, I absolutely don't. I don't think. Um, I think animals are actually. I don't think they do make the environment well. I mean, look at the number of wild animals. There's a lot of
Well, if
wild
we want to look at
animals.
free living beings, though, I mean, we just destroy what around 200 species of both plants and our fellow animals each day, is it? So, and the leading cause of species extinction, as I'm sure you've come across and maybe you have a take on it, is animal use. So we're actually destroying free living beings, right?
I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that it's that clear cut. That all the numbers, these outrageous numbers about the amount of water to make a quarter pounder. It just I'm not convinced at all. I mean, look, you look at the problems in California with the water, and one of the leading problems is the nut industry, the almonds. They suck out so much of the water that they're affecting local wildlife in terms of draining streams, and so it's not that clear cut that it's the animal agriculture that's the problem. It seems to be that it's the way that humans are um, using land, whether it's for animals or plants, that they're not doing it in the correct way.
Well, I think the food system in general is a complicated question, isn't it? Because,
Very.
well, I guess it's not only the vegans eating almonds, and I know avocados is the other one that comes up,
Yeah.
but there's also no requirement. I can't remember last time I've had an almond, and I might have like one avocado a month, so I'm not.
Mm.
Yeah, so but I think to me, these complex questions about our food system are going to be more likely to be answered when we have a more mindful take on this versus just saying, dismissing veganism because of these outliers, as I put them. You know what I mean?
Well,
Well,
I think it's
yeah, sorry, if I could just going back to the earlier thing,
yeah.
because I don't think, just to clarify, just so I know what you were saying. I mean, do you accept that the conversion ratios are poor when we filter our plants through our fellow animals? That it take a lot more
Well,
calories?
it depends whether do we know that they don't that the nutrients aren't different when we consume it via a an animal product.
I'd agree with you there. I think they are different. I think the micronutrient density is much higher in plants.
But it may I'm it's a different thing. It's a different. I was going to say it's a different animal, but eating a plant that's you say right, eating a plant. You might as well eat the plant than eat the plant after it's gone through the animal. But then you could take that to a slightly more absurd level and say, well, if the plant gets the nutrients from the soil and sunlight and water, if you rinse the soil and just drink the juice from the soil and sit in the sunlight drinking some water, then you've bypassed the plant as well and gone direct to the nutrient source of the plant.
Do you think we have a moral obligation to not use plants?
Well, I'm saying well, it's not that. It's the same.
I hear what you're saying. I'm just curious where the conclusion takes us.
The
And
conclusion. Well,
to me,
you
it's
say,
different because we've got an individual who we agree is unique and aware,
yeah.
worthy of respect, and then we're talking about a plant in the same breath. And I guess the nutrient, I appreciate nutrients cycle through things, but
But
We've
would
got
it
to
be the
go to
same?
nutrient. Yeah.
Could you do that? Could you then use the same argument, not from a moral point of view, but could you say then, if you rinse the soil and drink the juice, drink the nutrients that you've rinsed out of the soil and leave the gritty bits behind, and just drink water and sit in the sun,
Well,
would you get the nutrition?
I'll confess I haven't heard that before.
Well, it's
But it's well, I mean, to that point though, I mean, I think the key nutrient that I'll acknowledge is something that vegans should be aware of is B12. I imagine you've
Mhm.
looked into this yourself because that's the one,
Yeah,
because one of my questions was going to be, if you've done your research and you're convinced, that we do need to eat or use our fellow animals, which nutrient? And but B12 is, often with dirt, but that's not just vegans, it's everyone. I mean, it's what 39% of Westerners have a
right.
B12 deficiency. So I think these problems are being attached to veganism. That it's a modern problem. It's not a vegan problem
Right.
solely. So I'm just curious what nutrient. Like to me, if we're gonna go kill someone right now, a fellow animal, for sustenance, we'd need a pretty good reason, wouldn't we? I mean, what's that reason? I'm not convinced. I'll throw
Well,
it
I
back
suppose,
at you. I think neither of us is convinced.
and for me, it's you say, well, why did humans start in the first place? All other animals, all right, they might have started off, if the Bible's right, as herbivores, but all animals. If let's take it from an evolutionary point of view, then you'd say that evolution equipped all animals, kind of programmed them to eat their natural diet. So they don't choose. They don't. No, they don't. The animals don't choose which style they want to be. They're just born herbivores, omnivores, carnivores, and they all eat their natural diet. So why would humans, if we weren't, if animals weren't part of our natural diet, why would we have done that? Why are we the odd ones out? And so when would that have
We're not
started,
though,
and
are
why
we?
did it start?
There's lots of examples of our fellow animals surviving, free living, who eat plants. Some of the strong, yeah, I'm sure you've heard the line. Some of the strongest
Oh
animals.
yeah, yeah,
Your elephants, your gorillas, which
but
we're,
it's
we're
natural for
basically
them.
hairless apes, aren't we? Apes are just fine without, primarily on plants. I appreciate in free living
Am I
situations there
hairless?
might be a. Sorry.
I hope I'm not. I hope I'm not hairless.
Well, compared to a genuine ape.
um, no, well, my point isn't there are some herbivores, but I'm saying that if you're looking at it from an evolutionary point of view, that animals eat their natural diet. Some are herbivores, some aren't. Now, why are humans, if we're not herbivores, if we are herbivores, then why aren't we eating? Why were we never eating like herbivores? We always seem to be eating meat throughout history. I've never seen a civilization where the animal products like the fish and the birds and the land animals weren't prized as food. So we're not. Oh, would you say that we are? Are you claiming that we are natural herbivores then, or are you claiming that we can survive as natural as not natural as herbivores? Is that what you're saying, that we can survive as herbivores, but we're
I
not
would
natural
say
herbivores?
I appreciate and I'm definitely it's nice to see that you're so well researched on this because I think a lot of people come across this topic and kind of brush it to the side where you've kind of dove into it for the last several years it sounds like. So I'm sure you've come across a lot of the claims making around being herbivores. I take a much more easy to swallow approach, as it were, no pun intended.
Right.
That even if we're omnivores, that still means we don't need. It means we can choose. Although I'd argue it's not really a choice when we take the moral question into consideration. So I wouldn't necessarily make the case that we're herbivores, although I also wouldn't reject it. But that's not really where my claims making starts. It's just is it a requirement? And my answer would be no, based on all the modern science.
But then you'd have to dismiss all the people who tried it and didn't do very well on it. You'd have to say that the theory, which hasn't really been around for that long, veganism, the idea that we can manage on an entirely plant-based diet, is relatively new. And some people have tried it without thinking, yeah, I don't want to eat animals. They go into it and it doesn't go well. So are you willing to dismiss the experiences of all the people who say, no, I tried it. I thought I did it right. I didn't restrict, and my health suffered. So you're really saying that the scientific theory is more important than the individual experiences, and that I mean, a lot of the individual experiences are written off as anecdotes. They didn't do it right. They weren't committed. Um, it's a placebo. They just didn't want to do it. It's just an excuse. They're looking for it. Are you willing to take that? Are you willing to go that far and say that everybody will manage, and there aren't people who really did not do well on it?
I wouldn't dismiss those experiences. However, I do think if we have on one side anecdotal personal experiences, on the other side we have all the major dietetics associations saying it's completely unnecessary at all stages of life. I understand there are, if individuals have, eating disorders or allergies or a whole slew of other health conditions, there's certainly unique situations to take into account. I just think that that's oftentimes used as a shield to dodge the moral question. It's not, and maybe it's easier to talk more generally than your specific experience. It's just these situations often don't times that there aren't blood tests. There isn't a genuine discussion with a dietitian. There aren't, food journals. There isn't this, personally, if I felt like my health was suffering, and it's not, but if it was, I'd be doing everything, I would be taking an objective scientific approach to this, which it sounds like you did to a certain extent online. I'm just curious if a external professional, where this is their expertise, if more people did that, maybe more people could thrive, and possibly everyone.
Well, I don't know. I think the science. I don't think the science. Looking at the studies that have been done, as I say, I keep going back to this, but it's always the plant. Uh, the studies are always comparing with the standard American diet, so it doesn't, and reversing disease, so that it doesn't come across as it's a better diet than the animal. The claims that it's better for you than the animals, which is made. I don't believe that for a start. I think I'm more with you when you say, could it be made to work, whereas it may not be optimal. See, I think if there were a bit more honesty, where you'd say you may be sacrificing some nutrients that you'd have to make up, and so you have to be more careful. That, I think, I'd feel it was a bit more honest to say that. So we're looking at this from a moral point of view, and we now have the equipment, the science, to shore up anything that might be missing, and so we should do that. But the claim is no, it's better. It's better for you. And then you get some people who go, well, I went plant based and I suffered. Well, no,
And
you
then
have to
they
be very,
quit.
very
I'm with you on
careful. Yeah,
that. Yeah.
and then because they've been sold it as, yeah, it's a better diet, and so they launch into it for maybe ethical reasons. As I said before, they see a bit of Cube of Truth footage, and that's it. They don't do any research. Out goes the animal products, and because you do have to be careful, they do fail, and
Well,
that's
maybe that's some common ground. I've, you know, I mean, because I agree. I mean, most of the dietetic statements say a well planned. I mean,
mm,
my
yeah.
response to that is all diets should be well planned, and appreciate we're honing in on the dietary aspect of wider animal use here. But I mean, if that's the case, maybe we can agree on that. So, because I mean, if if I may put you on the spot a little bit, I haven't
Yeah.
heard a nutrient that we need to eat or use our fellow animals for, and absent of that, I'm not hearing a case to breed, use, or kill them.
Well, it's how we don't need to be experts in everything. I think we go through life relying on our senses, and if you can do just simple. Well, my research, in a sense, what I didn't look at all the evidence, obviously, in great detail. I just thought, right, I'll do the objective test. I'll plan a diet, a pre-industrial diet, pre the industrialization of the food supply. So my diet is going back a few hundred years. It's all, none of it's processed, or as little as possible. There is some processing in it, and see what works. And you think a simple diet that I would have been eating here probably few hundred years ago if I could afford it, and it's the results are fantastic, better than any results I've had before. I've never felt this good on a simple whole foods diet with animal products. So now we are going back to the fact of um, I've got to plan it very, very carefully, but may still not feel as good. Now, so again, it goes back to how much of my health or perceived health or well-being, you don't want to call it health, do I have to give up? Am I supposed to give? Where's the cutoff point? That's
Well, and I
what
want to be
that's
clear. I mean, I'm certainly not advocating giving up your own personal health, which is why I while I don't focus on the potential bonuses, I do think it's important to talk about still thriving.
yeah.
I'm not convinced. Yeah.
Because there are so many ex-vegan statements of people, and they don't seem to have an agenda. And I would have thought they're not all. I've looked at what some of them were eating, and you look at what they're eating, and it's very, very broad. It's not restrictive, and they do seem to have done it right, if you like, or tried to do it right, and they've still not done very well in terms of health. They do feel that their health has decayed, and my diet. I mean, my diet wasn't planned. My animal product diet or higher ratio wasn't planned very carefully. It's just, well, I'll just eat what people used to eat before, or what I mean, my parents' generation, they were simple people who ate animal product base. They ate large dripping sandwiches, so animal fat and salt sandwiches, and you think, wow, that's horrendous, saturated fat. And they weren't overweight. They were fairly healthy people. There were none of these diseases that some vegans, when you say I eat animal products, they say, well, just wait until you get diabetes and a heart attack, and you're probably 150 stone, which is why you're hiding behind a wolf avatar. Um, and they
A lot of body
and
shaming and ableism and stuff comes
yeah,
into that. I appreciate.
well,
Yeah, and that's not my
but
take.
this is the problem again is the honesty part that you say, um, it's not unhealthy. I think we're going around in circles a bit if I say this, but we do
No,
agree
go for
that
it. Yeah.
that if there was a bit more honesty, that you really do have to be careful. You can't just dive into it, because you probably will do it wrong. And then in to that extent, vegans can be their own worst enemies. That you just say, no, it's fantastic, it's the healthiest diet, and they say, well, how well planned does it have to be? It sounds like it's quite, for some people, it has to be very, very well planned and monitored, which then doesn't make it look like a very natural diet. If you have to have an expert on board and blood tests and um, checking your levels of X, Y, and Z every day.
Well,
Uh,
the sorry. Go ahead and finish. I thought you were.
well, oh no, I was just going to say it. So um, that I don't think if you're going to push veganism, I don't think you can. I think you have to be very careful not to allow people to think it's easier than it is, because for some people, even if they could survive fairly well on it, um, they're going to have to be careful, and I don't think that's emphasized. So you can just launch off into a vegan diet, and start to fail on it, and go, no, I'm not doing it. And then you go back to an unplanned diet involving animal produce, and you start to feel better. And you think, well, I didn't plan that. I just ate a normal, easy diet involving animal products, which all humans seem to have eaten throughout the ages, and probably that's why, because um, it it's a more natural diet, and you can have a simpler health outcomes without this very, very intricate planning that it seems um,
Well, and
required.
when I say that, I just say that as a safety net because I agree honesty and authenticity is important. I that's that to me that's not the usual experience. That wasn't my experience. I've never had to meet with a dietitian or any of these things.
Right.
I mean, I check occasionally, but I push back on the idea that blood tests are such a bad idea. I mean, we're looking at a modern society that I don't know the stat off the top of my head, but it's what about half Americans are permanently on a medication in their adult years.
Mhm.
And you look at the modern medical system. I think vegans having a chat with a dietitian to help them be more mindful of what they're putting in their body and an occasional blood test once every few years pales in comparison to the alternative, in my view.
What the alternative of what people are eating and making themselves sick, or the or from the
Yeah, I'm
animals
just saying. I
perspective?
think to just say vegans have dietitians and blood tests, so it's not a natural diet, as it were. I think that's not looking at that's an incomplete comparison to not look at the other side of things that most people have all kinds of medications they're constantly putting in their bodies. You know, that does that make the non-vegan diet unhealthy or sorry unnatural? Like to me,
Well, no,
it's
but what's unnatural about the standard American diet is it's horribly processed. It's
well,
totally
I'll agree with
corrupt.
you there. I'll agree with you there.
I think food has been allowed, big business interests and profit has allowed um, diet or food industry to feed people dreadful stuff, poisonous stuff, absolutely corrupt. I think so. The processed food, cheap rubbish, really. Um, if you look at, I mean, if you look at something, the process of what chicken looks like before it becomes a McDonald's chicken nugget. I mean, it's goo. It's horrendous stuff. It's not chicken
Or
anymore, really.
or when you look at them at a sanctuary and you look at the individual before that, I think that that's where I would encourage our focus to shift.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But
But the what people are getting sick because the food industry is corrupt, and but I can see if nobody want, I don't think anybody actually wants to eat animals. I think the accusation that some people say is you enjoy. Somebody even put that to me. They say, no, you just. It's not that you feel better. You just enjoy abusing animals. And you think, well, that's a bit of an accusation, isn't it? That I'm. It's an excuse. I'm saying I feel better because I actually enjoy abusing animals. That's quite a strange thing for someone to say.
yeah, it's there's a lot wrapped up in this because I know myself I support it for the first 32 years of my life animal use. So I do think we're just kind of brought into this culture that teaches us as normal, natural, and all this stuff. Maybe we're on this. Maybe there's some common ground in this well planned side of things, but I mean, if we can just shift back to the ethics a little bit, because
Mhm.
I appreciate. I don't want to. I don't know what a wolf's bedtime is, but I don't want to keep you you two. Or
No,
maybe
I'm
I
all
guess
right. Yes,
wolves are
yes.
out. Wolves are usually out prowling at night, probably, aren't they? So
Well,
this is probably your morning time, isn't it?
no, it's still light. No, it's still light, so we're good.
But real quickly, well, maybe not real quickly. You mentioned earlier some of the language that's often times in the movement used, like murder and all this stuff. And I'm just
Mhm.
curious if we were looking at the mass killing of humans, how would you like? What language would you describe it if we were killing humans in mass?
Well, we don't. There's no advantage. There's no necessary. Well, it depends on the situation, but when you're looking at things like rape, torture, murder, they're not necessary. But people in certain areas. I mean, if you're looking at people living in extreme climates, they live on fish sometimes or seafood. If it's a fairly icy climate, there is no um, pretty much no animal plant produce available, especially not in the winter. So their nutrition comes from animals. So you'd say they don't go out killing animals for sport. They don't have any choice if they're going to live there. The argument could be that well they should move somewhere where there are plants so that they didn't have to eat them. But
Well, and
they're not.
I guess I'm not going to go out and advocate towards indigenous groups specifically. I mean, that to me, that's a bit of a separate conversation. I guess the question is, should we apply extreme situations to non-extreme ones that you and I live in?
If anybody's taking part in an activity um, out of necessity, can it ever be called murder for somebody else? You say, well, somebody in Greenland or somewhere is fishing because there are no plants. It's not murder. That's fine. That's expediency. But if I do it because it makes me feel better, because I have a better health outcome or a better sense of well-being, suddenly it's murder. That's not consistent. Murder is murder.
Well, if yeah, I'm happy to go down the path a little bit because if we were one of my favorite things to do is the flip it to test it approach. If we were looking at this in the human context, and let's say you're in your human form, your non-wolf form, and the two of us were in a survival situation, and one of us
Hmm.
killed the other, so
Yeah.
that we could then eat them. I think that's still murder. I think we might be able to explain it, but it's still murder, right? Even if it's quote necessary.
Well, if it's humans, if it, what you mean, it we're the same species or
Okay,
different
so
species?
you're coming at it more from like murder is a human specific term. Is that more what you're coming at it from versus the necessity thing?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't, no matter what the necessity, I wouldn't kill another human being. Because I mean, I remember watching. There was a video when John Venus last year quit, and Joey was saying if you were in a survival situation, then yes, you'd kill the fish, and you go, well, how? Isn't that just speak? If all sentient animals have got rights, then just because they're a different species and you're stronger than them and you could overpower them, why then would you? What right do you have then to kill them and eat them for survival if you wouldn't kill
Yeah,
another human?
I think there's obviously these kind of thought experiments that can kind of explore these issues. I guess the question is what's morally relevant, the morally relevant difference between humans and our fellow animals. And I guess my earlier question around the mass killing, I'm guessing because you're a study of the animal movement that you've come across some of the discussion around the Holocaust language. And I'm just
Yep,
curious what you think about framing it as the animal Holocaust. If you had any opinions on that, I'm guessing you've probably come across that.
I have come across that. Yes, yeah. The language is kind of evolving in the movement, even just in the 2 years that I've been aware of vegan YouTube. But I think it's easy to see it like that because of the way the methods make it very easy. I mean, um, Vegan Foot Soldier did a interesting video showing how the transport system, the systems used in the meat industry, were exact copies of the actual Holocaust of the Second World War. The transportation systems were the same. The idea of not damaging the bodies, of um, quick execution, yeah, and he was saying they're all the methods developed to for the Holocaust are now used in the meat industry to make it efficient and more profitable. So you've got the horrendous conditions of factory farming. Now, yeah, I think factory farming is an absolute disgrace, and it's all down to the again the corruption of greed. Um, but would I
So it sounds
say
like, sorry, go ahead.
no? No. Well, I was just thinking that you know the argument is that there's no humane killing. That even if you give an animal a a nice life, you look after it, you give it as long a life as is feasible, really, and then you say you humanely kill it and eat it for nutrition. And the argument is no, 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 no. There's no such thing. They're an individual. They want to live. Just by because you've given them a fairly nice life and looked after them, you still have no right to kill them. And my point goes back to well, that's how it used to be because people had to do it. They did eat to survive. They didn't eat. I don't think the animal produce humans used to eat animal produce out of choice. It was a survival situation, and so it does. Well, I think we started off in our comments exchange by me saying that my position was more welfare. I don't that.
Yeah, and I guess I have a position on welfare too. I do think it's a bit of a distraction because it further entrenches animal use. But I think that the intention there, there's probably some overlap between us. I mean, I guess real quickly, you just mentioned humanely killing it. I mean, you mentioned you have some cat friends or cat family members. I mean, do you think your cats are an it, or do you think
That
there's
wasn't that wasn't
something or someone?
I didn't actually. That was just no. I don't. That's not really how I think when I say
Hmm.
it, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've got, well,
Just
again, it's
just
this,
just curious. I think the speciesism is throughout our language, so I'm just curious what your kind of thought process was on that.
well, I think if we do have to eat, it depends on, it really does come down to, do we need, or have, if you see, in the past, if we did need to eat animals out of necessity, then you pick the ones that were the most suitable. So some animals, the kind of herd animals, the passive herd animals, are the most suitable. Now, if it's a necessity, you haven't got much choice. You're going to have to kill and eat something. So are you going to kill cows, or are you going to kill dogs and cats? It does then become which is the most um, reasonable thing to do, and you're not then, you can't then say, well, I can't kill any of them because they're individuals. It depends,
Why
because
can't we?
if
Why can't we say that? I'm not sure what the case is that we can't say that because we've yet to name a nutrient. I mean, you talked about the Seventh Day Adventist study, but like, what's the study? What's the nutrient? I mean, I'm happy to hear it. Like I appreciate that you're we're talking about mainstream culture that a lot of people believe this, but I'm not hearing it. You
well,
know,
it's I'd have to be, I'm not going to, I'd have to be an expert in nutrition to answer that, and I'm not. So, but am I going to say
absent.
that?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just say, well, all I can go on is experience. I've done the test. I've tried it. I've tried the two, and it's clear that that there are benefits from eating animal products. So um, we go back. We
Absent.
go back.
Yeah,
Go
I'm just
on.
saying, like,
Sorry.
absent of being an expert. I mean, isn't that when we should listen to the experts? And the experts are saying it's completely unnecessary at all stages of life. I appreciate there's specific situations, but to your point, I mean, maybe we're going around in circles here. I just,
Well, no, I don't. I don't. I'm not sure. Well, this goes back to, can you trust the experts? I mean, so there are 10,000 qualified dietitians, but they're all just regurgitating the position of the body. It doesn't matter
I
how
don't
many.
agree with that. They're all, the most of them are doing their own independent research in addition to that. If the parent company, the parent group was completely off base, the UK Dietetics Association would be challenged by their 9,000 members. The US Dietetics Association would be challenged by their 100,000 plus members, and so
But most
on.
most of the dietitians simply take the are qualified by the parent body. So they take an exam designed by the parent body. So if they go against that, if they say no, I disagree, then they're not going to qualify as a dietitian. They have to. It's like any exam. You have to follow the syllabus and answer the questions of the prescribed material. You can't make it up as you go along. So
Isn't that a different question to challenging position statements that have been in place for decades? I
not
appreciate they have to
if
pass a test with certain criteria in place, but I'm talking about after they pass the test, they know the science, they study it, they continue to study it. I don't think they're all just followers. I mean, I appreciate that is kind of human nature. I think that's why we're in this mess to begin with. Maybe that's another common ground for us. But
I don't think the science. I haven't seen evidence that the science is precise enough. This is going back to what we were saying about, um, science is creates more and more uh, ever increasingly detailed approximations, but you're never actually there. You never get there. You get more detailed model, and you're never absolutely sure. And when you're dealing with a very very complex organism like the human body with all sorts of different parts and functions, then can you be absolutely certain of what's going on? It seems, and I mean, I never used to believe in evolution because I thought it's too complex. Everything around us didn't just happen. And this was from really young age. I think it was when I got our first cat, because I thought, no, that didn't come out of a big bang. Somebody designed cat. Um, and then along comes DNA. And I think to myself, well, that pretty much knocks evolution on the head because it's too precise. It's almost a digital code. You've got the CADG sequence in the double helix, and it's like a base 4 code. And you go, that's now we've got to believe that random changes in this extraordinarily detailed code produces more, different creatures, and you think it's too complex to understand, it's too complex, which is why it is reduced to studies, because you cannot know in an extraordinarily complex system what really is going on. You can't trace all the variables and how they all interact in an extraordinarily complex system. You can't model it, even with powerful computers. You can't accurately model it, which is why you end up doing with studies and trying to figure out. You do your randomly controlled um, uh, tests, and to try to get rid of the confounding factors, but you're still not absolutely certain what's going on. And so I'm not convinced by
Okay.
the science of nutrition. It's not precise. As a physicist, when you look at how complex even the smallest inquiries into atoms, into just single entities, and you think this is extraordinarily complex, even just a single atom, and then you take a massive model like the human body and think, right, I'm going to understand nutrition. And you go, not a chance. You're not going to get an accurate model. So I don't believe the theories. I don't believe the theories are that strong based on studies. So you might
Shouldn't
there
the
some of
opposite
it.
be true though? Shouldn't the
What's
opposite be
that?
true? There's also, I mean, if I'm using the same premise that what sounds like you're presenting, shouldn't it also be true that we're not sure we have to breed, use, and kill them? Shouldn't we give them the benefit of the doubt in the absence of the certainty that you're seeking?
Well, what you do if you're not sure, if you're not sure of the theory and you don't fully understand the theory, and you go, I'm never going to fully understand the theory. I'm never going to understand the human body at a double helix DNA level. Then you go, okay, what can I do? Well, you can try it. You can suck it and see. You can eat it and say, how do I react? And you go, well, I've done the test, and it's an objective test. I've just tried different diets, and you rank them, and you go, well, there's a clear winner. And sadly, it involved the animal products. And you say, well, why would I react better to that, so much better to that, if it's not my natural diet? And so, if I'm not going to eat it, then I'm going to pay a price.
So it sounds like you actually want to eat plant based slash live vegan, but maybe it's just the how to do it. Because I'd push back on it being objective if we're just listening to our bodies and we're not getting blood tests. To me, that this is seriously lacking objectivity.
Well, I think it's well, I disagree on that, because you say, well, how you feel is normally an indication of, if you feel great, you're normally in pretty good shape. If you feel dreadful for some reason and it continues, and you think, I've got a pain in a certain part of my body and it's getting worse and it's getting worse, and I don't feel terribly good, you go and get it checked out. You listen to your body and say, I get signals as to whether everything's fine or something's wrong. It's the same as you get a toothache. So if you eat a certain diet and you feel great, everything's all the slight issues that you had all clear up. You go, well, can I? Am I going to say, well, it might not be the best diet. It probably is just a feeling, and you all, yeah, that's what you go on. When you've got a toothache, it's just a feeling, but it means it's something wrong with you in your mouth.
I
If you feel
agree. I agree.
great,
Yeah, I agree with that to an extent. It's part of the picture, but it's not the whole picture though, is it? I mean a bit of a personal anecdote. My dad died of cancer. By the time he went to the doctor, it was too late. Like they didn't catch it. You know,
yeah.
it doesn't always work. So the whole idea that we should just listen to our bodies and that's the whole thing. And blood tests are too unnatural. I'm just not. I'm struggling to follow that line of thinking, especially when it involves a victim.
Um, I don't think. Well, I still think if it goes back to the idea that at what point do we get so scientific? At what point did we need to get so scientific and not trust how we felt? Now, science is quite recent in terms of nutrition. Before that, people just ate. They ate what they thought, what they could find, and if they felt good, they'd carry on eating it. Now, yeah, it's true. You can. I know this. I have the same experience of someone, um, a friend of my mother's, who seemed to be okay, and one day he doesn't feel so good, and 2 days later, two weeks later, he's died and he's riddled with cancer. But the thing about eating is that you get an immediate response. So you can eat one way for a few months and you'll feel a certain way, and then you change it and you feel a different way again quite quickly. So that's a causation. So you know that you know what's causing you to feel better. You've changed your diet. So you don't need to look too deeply into it. It's clear what's happened.
Don't we have a moral obligation to look into it though? I mean, if we're talking about, let's say cats are the only only non-human animal on the planet. I mean, wouldn't we have, because I use cats just because you know cats well. I mean, wouldn't that be a reason to that we do have an obligation to look into it more detailed versus just kill them because we're not sure?
Uh, well, I don't think you can say that we're not sure. If that's why aren't we sure? If we're surely we have. If you believe in evolution, then you must say that you'd have to agree that we eat pretty much what is natural to us. That
I
all,
don't
we're
think
just
there's
one of
much.
the.
I mean, I'm on a video chat talking to artificially stimulated wolves, so there's very little natural about this experience right now to me. But
But
yeah,
it goes back to why is it that humans are eating animals? Where and why did it start? If it's not our natural diet, and we just evolved like every other animal, why have we suddenly got come this far eating animals, and suddenly we've got a moral obligation to stop because we can kind of make up for it with a very, very careful planned diet and maybe some blood tests and maybe some um, supplements. And suddenly, at this late stage, now we've got a moral obligation. We didn't before, or did we?
well, I would argue that's moral progress, isn't it? I mean, just because we're not aware of a moral question doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I'd push back that it's this super complicated planned diet. I mean, my experience is I did blood tests to make sure, but I did one when I first started living vegan and one a year later just to make sure there was no major changes, and there wasn't, and that's all I've done. I yeah, I don't know.
See,
Yeah, I appreciate. Yeah, go ahead.
there's a model that I would say um, where I'd be 100% behind veganism, and that's let's go right back and say right, all animals were created as herbivores, and they stayed herbivores until because actually eating animal flesh was actually toxic, clearly toxic. Although some vegans will say that's still the case. But so we're all herbivores. Animal flesh is toxic, but suddenly science finds a compound that neutralizes the toxin, and people start eating animals. The taste buds. We go, oh yeah, we actually now science means we can eat animals and they taste great, so let's do it. Then you go, no, that's horrendous. You can't just suddenly say now that we can eat animals due to science, it's fine to do so. You go, yeah, I'd be vegan. I'd be saying, no, that's horrendous to say that because we can now do it, we will do it. For taste, that would be the taste buds argument then, because it's
Well, I
safe
may,
to
may,
eat them.
maybe there's some common ground there because I guess the thing I would add to that is, aren't we just looking at the same moral question just in reverse? I mean, just because something's the default state and the majority of society supports breeding, using, killing our fellow animals, like doesn't whether you start there or end there, if you it's because the reality of your situation is just the same thing in reverse, isn't it?
Well,
Just
no, there
because
was
we've
no,
been
there was
doing something doesn't mean that it's moral either.
well, I don't see how it's suddenly has it always been immoral to eat animals for humans? That's the question
I
then.
I think there's a lot of things that have always been immoral, but maybe there's not in the focal point of society. I mean, we talked about slavery earlier. I mean, just because people may not have been thinking about it as much doesn't mean there wasn't a moral question there. And using your same logic of, it's natural. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of pro-slavery individuals that said it's natural to, what else are they going to do? They work my land and all this stuff.
But that
I'm
is
not sure what's
different
going to
though.
happen if they don't. What's that?
It slavery doesn't affect you physically in any way. You don't have to own slaves if you it's that's a completely different thing. You don't There's no nutritional benefit to eating to own not eating, don't eat slaves. To own
Well, when we
slaves.
do when it comes to our fellow animals, don't we? They are
Well, yeah,
slaves, right?
but you say why it still comes back to why is it so prevalent? Why does everybody do it? Why is every human consumed in every culture consumed animal products? When did it start, and was it why did everybody go immoral then? And why when did it start? And if everybody has done it, are you really going to say that it's always been immoral to for humans to eat animals? Is that your position?
Are you thinking like the last 2,000 years
Well,
plus,
no, I'm
just in
thinking.
general?
Well, you see, some animals. If you go back to Eden again, you go all right. Everybody was herbivore, but some after the fall, they didn't stay herbivore, and you can't. Something turned herbivores into carnivores, so that there then became a whole range of animals. Some herbivores, some omnivores, some carnivores. So if carnivores, natural carnivores, they just eat out of they're programmed to eat. Their nutrition comes from killing other animals in horrible ways. So is that possible that there is a nutritional need for humans? There was a nutritional need for humans to eat animals because we didn't remain herbivores, just like the lions didn't remain herbivores. And if that's the case, if that's why we ate animals as well as plants for nutrition, then you call that immoral throughout human history
I
that we
think the absent of certainty, because it seems like, if I may, the bulk of your case has been that we need to from a nutritional perspective, but also that the nutrition isn't that clear. So I don't know how we can say, oh yeah, it's perfectly fine to do this when we're not sure. Like, why is the default position to breed, use, and kill 3 trillion unique individuals every year?
because it seems to me that that was our natural diet. We didn't otherwise. I
That's not
see
science.
why.
You talk about that's not objective, though, is it?
Well, you'd say all animals eat all animals eat their natural diet. You don't find
Humans
lions.
don't. I agree. Humans don't. We don't live in
Well,
a natural state. We've effectively removed ourselves from nature, which is a different topic.
we have. Well, yeah,
But
we definitely have. But you
agree
go
with
you
that.
go and
Yeah.
say why have we? It goes back to when and why did it start? We're not natural herbivores. I wouldn't
Isn't
say
the
we're
more
natural
important
herbivores.
question here today? Is it
No,
necessary versus when did it start?
I don't think it is because it's just our nature. Then, if we did it, if our nature was to eat animals for hundreds of thousands of years, it can't be moral. It suddenly can't be moral at some point in
What
history, late in the day, to say it's now immoral because we can just about survive, really, with a bit of science chucked in. That doesn't make sense.
Well, I don't think that's the position. With a bit of science checked in, I think the science is just proving it can be done. It's all, the human's bodies. The human body's always been there. I, yeah,
But but we're
yeah.
talking now. I mean, the reliance. You say, okay, we're not relying on science that much, but we are. It does seem that we're relying for a whole foods plant-based diet on a transport infrastructure to get the fresh produce all around the world. I mean, there's not a lot growing. There's not a lot of produce that I can eat at the moment here. I'm relying on imports. Now, another problem you've got with the climate emergency is that the transport system, the integrated transport system, is being taken down because of the carbon footprint problem. And so we're not going to have access. The whole idea of a whole foods plant-based diet, eat the rainbow, that's a myth. That's not going to happen. The carbon footprint, the climate emergency is going to take that down, which means that what's happening from what I've looked at is that in a way veganism is being pushed so that the plant-based junk food industry can operate in plain sight, because that looks like it's going to be our diet in the future. It's not going to be whole foods. It's going to be just plant-based junk, the artificial meats, if we're lucky, and the burgers. It's going to be which are all made out of powder proteins, water, and oil, and it looks like horrendous stuff with a bit of all made to look prettified to look like proper food. But
Why,
we're
why
not
do you
going
think
to.
whole foods are going to go away? Processed foods are more expensive. If anything, it'd be the other way
It's not.
around.
It's not price. No, it's not price. It's going to be the problem is going to be the carbon footprint of the carting all this stuff, or of distributing all this fresh, inefficient system for distributing the food all around the world to people. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get flights of bananas and pineapples and sharon fruit being carted around the world, because there's the carbon footprint. And if there were, what there is going to be is going to be expensive, because it'll have to reflect the actual carbon emissions. So where things are changing, and we're not. It's not simply a case of let's save the planet by, or let's take the moral decision and save the planet by switching to a whole foods plant-based diet. That's a myth. The world's changing. The old capitalist system is on its knees. It's going down, and we're going to have, and something else is coming. You can see that if you listen to the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, we are moving. All the countries are moving to this net carbon zero world, where anything with a carbon footprint is going to be expensive. And so you're going to lose. We're going to lose the whole foods plant based. We're not going to be eating. We're not going to be eating that. That's definitely not going to happen. There's no.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's kind of a different question as to the carbon footprint. What's going to happen in the future? I'm more interested in what we know now, at least. I mean, Andrew's just raised a point around carbon footprint of eating meat is far greater. I mean, because I'll put my hands up. Like, I agree with you. Like, there's a lot of improvements that could be made in our food system. I think the UK specifically, there's a lot of things that we could grow here locally. I mean, I've got a whole list somewhere of things that we could start. You know, quinoa, for instance, could be grown in the UK. So I agree with that. That I just don't think that swerves the moral question. I guess, and to give a specific example, I can link this to you afterwards if you haven't seen it. But in case you haven't, maybe there's something to discuss there. The Joseph Poor study, because their main conclusion, this is a massive meta-analysis. I've got here the 38,700 farms, 1,600 processors. Their main conclusion is that the impacts from the lowest impact animal so-called products exceed those of the vegetable substitutes. So regardless of, basically across like all kinds of quote food. So I don't know why. I mean, I appreciate flying stuff around the world is difficult, and we should swerve that, but we can do that and still not breed, use, and kill unique individuals.
Well, I think the whole of the food chain is under threat. Now, well, you wouldn't say that animals are food, obviously, but if you take the animal out off the table, kick them off the plate, and
I think they'll happily go. To be fair,
well,
no
yeah,
kicking
yeah.
needed.
Um,
Fair,
I think they will. The next attack, if you like, or the next price will be for the whole foods, the whole foods plant-based. I don't think they're going to just get a pass. You say, okay, it's whole foods plant-based is far less than the carbon footprint than the animal product. Fair enough. That might well be the case, but it's going. If there is a significant carbon footprint for flying fresh food around the world, that's going to have to go as well. And the
I'm fine
most
with that.
efficient,
I'm okay with that.
but you've
It
got
sounds like so we'll stop killing, we'll stop breeding, using, and killing our fellow animals, and we'll stop flying bananas around the world too. I'll sign up for that.
okay, but there's another part to it which people
I knew
ignore.
there was
Well,
going to
of
be a catch.
course, there's going to be a catch, um,
Fair
and
enough.
that's the food safety. Food safety is another excuse to control the food supply, which means you can't. Everything will have to be monitored to make sure it's safe. Now, because we don't want all these pandemics floating around. We don't want geese flying overhead and dropping poo on your lettuce, and there you eat your lettuce and you've suddenly started a bird flu epidemic or something related to that. And so the whole um, move is to control the food supplies. Everything's going to be centralized, and the excuse for that is carbon footprint and the pandemics. So we need food safety and we need low carbon footprint. And so we don't want people growing food in their gardens because we don't know where that comes from. It could be tainted. It could start another pandemic of some kind. And so if you think
That's
local
precisely what
food,
I was going to say, though. I mean, we can grow our own food through an allotment, can't we?
that's not going to be permitted. It's too dodgy. You're not going to be allowed to do that because it's
Is
food
that relevant
safety.
to? Is
Well,
that
food
relevant to the moral
safety.
question of using animals today, though? Just because they
Well, I don't
might
know.
block allotment growing in the future, like I don't know how we can make that claim.
Well, it's obvious. If you keep an eye on what's happening, if you kept an eye on, it's not far away. We're not saying this is happening now. So you say, well, right, is if we've got no animal product, we can't eat those for moral reasons, and well, they're going to disappear anyway for the carbon reasons. But then the whole foods, all of the whole foods disappear for the same reason, and they go, well, we'll grow locally then. As you say, I don't want. I'm not bothered about stuff coming halfway around the world. I'll just grow a few. Um, but then you say, well, okay, but that's going to be controlled as well because all food is now potentially dangerous. All food is now potentially tainted by organisms that could start all kinds of horrible pandemics. And when you look at the foods that are considered to be dangerous, you'd think, well, they're surely all the animal foods. But you look at the list, I think it's from the USDA, and a lot of them are plant foods, which you think, what's that? You're not going to get if
That's
COVID.
not.
So it's
Sorry.
all going to be. It's all going to be. Everything is going to be controlled. Now, fine. In a way.
Animal use is the leading cause of pandemics, though. Just before we move on from that,
Well,
you
yes.
think plants are the leading cause of pandemics?
No, no, I'm not
I mean,
saying
it's a
that, but
human
they're.
centric. It's a human centric concern. It's not an animal rights concern. But if we're going to talk about what
But no,
caused
but
it, it
they.
was a wet market in China, right?
But what I'm saying is that the USDA are calling um, plant foods, putting plant foods on the dangerous list that need to be monitored as well, which surprises me. That you say, okay, if most of the pandemics are caused, I'm not going to argue with that. If you say bird flu and are animal related, yeah, sure. But if they're going to start to control everything, because everything's a threat, and you can't grow. I mean, they're going to ban keeping local animal produce is going to be banned. But then they're going to move on to saying nobody can grow their own food. It all has to be certified as clean and safe. And then, but in a way, the good news for vegans is that animal products are going to be taken off because that's what the UN and the World Economic Forum want. 90%. Biden says that 90% of beef is going to finish by 2030, and 50% of all animal produce is going to finish by 2030. So the war on it's going vegans' way in a way. It's going the way of vegans. The UN want 90%, also want 90% of beef off the plate by 2030. So it is going your. It is actually
Is it
mainstream.
though? So
Yeah,
if
definitely.
we talk about beef, cows, if we take cows off the menu, they're not going to be replaced by lentils. They're going to be replaced by chickens and other animals, aren't they?
No, no, they're not because they want 50% of the rest of the animals. So they want 90% of cows by 2030 and 50 and Biden says he wants 50% of all other animal products by 2030 as well. So it's not going to be made up by chickens. The whole of the animal
Okay.
industry is going down. So it's going your way. It is mainstream. And as I said, I think to a large degree veganism is being used as promoted as a smokescreen to produce the mock meats, which will replace all the natural foods. Well, again, I'm including the animal products, so you wouldn't agree with that. But the everything that's grown in nature that we used to eat, it won't. That won't. That's going to go down. That's all that system because it's all dangerous. It all has to be certified as clean, and we have to know where it's grown, and only big corporations are going to be able to have the logistics to certify where the crops were grown, when they were grown, because if there's a problem discovered in the food, they're going to want to trace it back to exactly where it was grown and isolate it. It's all controlled. So it is going vegan. It is mainstream. It's not an accident that veganism is growing at the time when um, we've got the climate emergency and a push for uh, food safety. Food
Well, yeah. I
safety.
mean, it started in World War II, though, didn't it? It didn't start just recently.
What's that? Food safety.
Veganism, like the Vegan Society,
Oh no, no,
was
no, no, no. But it's
44.
right. Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. No, but it's being heavily pushed at the moment. When you say it isn't mainstream, but when you look at TV, it's all about um, everything. Everything over the years has gradually said has gradually been about more animal produce. It's all been get your five a day, drink water. That message has been consistent for decades. In fact, I think that's why I slowly slid towards an entirely plant-based diet. I think hearing that message repeated for decades, you slowly kind of it's like propaganda. You slowly go, oh yeah, all right, I need my five a day. I need to drink more water, and it's been an agenda. It's not an accident that veganism is growing now. It is
Is your position
mainstream.
that there's more vegan propaganda than
Yeah,
propaganda
oh
or
yeah.
marketing promoting animal use?
Well,
If I
it,
walk
it,
down the
it
street here in Brighton, there is every other business, if not every business, is promoting animal use, and maybe a handful are vegan. That's here in Brighton.
but
I,
that's
I,
but
I think
it's
there's far
changing.
more. Maybe
It's
I would
changing
agree. Maybe it's changing.
quickly though. This decade, the
Well,
UN and the WEF are saying that this is going to be a you're going to get vertigo at the speed of which things are going to change as we head towards Agenda 2030. So it is, in a way, going your way, but not for ethical reasons. I mean, the UN aren't doing it for ethical reasons, but it is the animal industry is going down definitely.
okay.
But
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe I, in a way, I hope you're right, but I appreciate there's a lot wrapped up in that. I think. I mean, I appreciate we're coming up on 2 hours now, so it'd probably be good
are we?
to start to draw things to a close. It's yeah, when you get talking, the time flies fast, doesn't it? But
Yeah, it doesn't feel like 2 hours.
I know it goes quick. But I think if I were just to wrap up some maybe closing thoughts, and then I'll let you do the same. I mean, recently we were talking about two different threads here. I mean, I appreciate there's a
Yeah,
lot of questions about the future. Given we're in an apocalypse, I'll completely, appreciate the future's uncertain. To me, that's separate to the moral question of
definitely.
breeding, using, and killing our fellow animals. So I do think it's a bit of a distraction to that moral question, personally. I appreciate what you're saying, that there could be some connection from what you're saying, though. I mean, I think it sounds like we agree that we oppose factory farming, and we like it's agree on animal welfare from a moral perspective. I think it's there's obviously caveats that I do think it distracts from the end goal.
Yeah.
However, there's the moral thing that we agree with there, that they're worthy of some moral consideration. I would just argue that includes not using them at all. it sounds like we agree well-planned diets, from the dietary aspects. And you talked about how your body feels, and we've talked a lot about science. I mean, why not combine the two and talk about our bodies and science? And then the last point that it sounds like we might agree on is that the framing it as the animal holocaust is accurate terminology.
It is in
Or
terms. It's definitely
there's at least some similarities there, especially considering it was originally for our fellow animals and then applied to humans.
well. The
So,
it's definitely. I mean, the factory farming is an absolute disgrace. As is well. It's like the was it Ralph the
oh
in
yeah,
the
save Ralph.
yeah,
Yeah.
say Ralph. So testing on animals. Also absolutely unjustifiable. It just, I mean, that is torture, isn't it? Strictly, absolutely, and the conditions in factory farms are terrible. Um, Now, if I would say, I would still say that we are different. They don't have the same um, concerns or awareness animals that we do. Some more than others, but I don't. If they're not aware of what's going to happen and they're having a reasonable life, I don't see that killing them is necessarily, if it's for nutrition, if it is nutritionally necessary, I don't see that as any different from any other animal that needs animal produce. Now, well, I mean, look, take my cats. I've got two cats. Now, at some point, I'm going to kill them when they get ill. I'm not going to eat them. But you say, well, if I needed the nutrition from, if humans had to eat cats to survive, then you'd say, well, if you killed them earlier in their life, and they weren't aware of it coming. They don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. They have a nice life, and you kill them, and you eat them, and you survive, or you look after them for longer. They have a longer life, and then they get ill, and you kill them because you say, "I'm not going to use." You could say, "I euthanize them," but basically, I'm going to kill them. They get killed. I
Hmm.
pay for someone to come along and kill them because I don't want them to suffer. And I've done that several times, too often. I don't like it. You see your sick cat and you think, I could let nature take its course and just leave it to suffer, or I could pay someone to come to my house and they will kill them. And that's what I
So it
did.
sounds like you wouldn't be happy to kill your own animals either, then, right? You prefer to pay someone else to do it? I mean, you talk
Well,
about the natural thing. Isn't that pretty unnatural when we have to pay somebody else to do something because we're not comfortable doing it ourselves?
they've got the equipment. They can euthanize them via an injection
I'm not
rather than
talking about your.
how much.
I'm sorry. I'm not talking
Oh
about your
yeah, yeah.
cats. I'm
No,
talking
sorry, yeah,
about yeah.
uh,
By all means, pay someone to help with your cats. I'm
yeah,
not. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not gonna hit them over the head with a shovel. I think when they're ill, I think I'd prefer someone to come and give them an injection. It seems a little more humane, if there is such a thing as humane
At least
euthanasia.
that's with their intentions in mind. It's not being assuming we're adopting those individuals too, and we're not supporting the whole quote pet breeding industry, which is maybe a different topic. But
Well,
yeah,
that's another. Yeah, that is an interesting one because I did see another video with Ed talking about effectively the fact that from the vegan position that keeping companion animals is not compatible. It's also to a certain extent exploitation. And he did say something that normally he speaks in a fairly assured way, but he started to kind of stammer over a point he made where he tried to say that dog well he called it dog ownership, but the dog is essentially a captive who's totally controlled, and essentially there's not much difference between the behavior of a dog and a captive who develops Stockholm syndrome. And I thought, wow, that's I'm not surprised he stuttered a bit over that because that was quite a mighty claim. Because a well kept pet, they're not, they don't sense of themselves as captives. I mean, yes, you can control a dog more than you would a human, but they seem to get into that they seem to love it. A well cared for dog is when you see a well cared for dog bounding along a beach with its owner, that's not a captive. That's not a captive captor situation where the dog has has developed this strange Stockholm system because they're fully dependent on that. That was a ridiculous. I thought that was a ridiculous point that he made. And he seemed quite uncomfortable making it because I think he realised that he was going out on a bit of a limb. But he did in the same
Yeah.
video. He did say that essentially pet ownership, well, keeping of companion animals, the companion animals would become extinct, just the same as would farmed animals. All domesticated animals, whether farm or companion, including guide dogs for the blind, they would all go. There'd be no domesticated animals. We'd have no. So animals are friends, not food. Well, no, they'd be neither, because we'd have contact with neither. So
To me, when we look at individuals who we take into our homes, the so-called pets. To me, the big question is the breeding. I mean, I don't know how you feel about purebred and all this stuff in populations. I mean, when individuals are being killed in shelters because there's too many of them. To me, it's not a question for our time. It's a question for the future.
Yeah, I
Because
think.
we can adopt. We're still helping someone, and yeah,
Well, there are so many stray and unneutered cats that I doubt that whether they would actually disappear. I don't think they would become extinct. They would need homes. So there's no case for breeding companion animals. There'd always be stray animals to look after for a
that
long
I agree
time.
with you. That I agree with you. So
I mean,
maybe
I've never.
yeah.
Yeah, but it might be. Yeah, that probably would be a good place to end on something we definitely agree on. But
Common ground. Stop
yeah,
breeding dogs and cats.
stop breeding dogs and
Or
cats.
wolves.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a she wolf or any cubs, so I chose not to go down that route. Because I
Fair
thought
enough.
the world. I thought this is in 1985, and I thought I'd read the Bible. I've been reading the Bible for 4 years at that point, and I thought I think the world's going to get weird in my lifetime. And so I thought I'm going to travel light. I'm not going to get too cozy. And here we are. And at the end of 2000 and the beginning of 2020, the world got very weird. So I'm pleased with that call, really. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, but there is a problem, of course. We'd have to with keeping companion animals. Then is we'd have to find a vegan diet for them, would we? Because we can't kill animals to feed them if we've got domesticated.
I have 2 vegan dogs at home. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, dogs are easier, aren't they? Dogs are
Yeah.
more omnivorous than cats. I mean, cats do look like much more like predators, and they behave more like predators. I mean, they kill stuff.
That's my understanding that cats are trickier. I'm not up to speed on cats to really.
No,
Yeah.
well,
I know
and I
there's
mean,
chlorine, but allegedly that can be
no.
synthetic. But yeah.
And they do. I mean, the thing about cats, they do like to bring home their trophies, and you think, well, they don't even eat them; they just drop them on my bedroom floor, and you think, yeah, I've got a mouse again.
Yeah,
And
it's
you
for
think
so-called sport, which humans do the
well,
same
yes.
thing, don't we? We kill individuals just for the quote sport of it.
Yeah, and that's unnecessary, isn't it? I mean, when I think about the great white hunter with his wall full of heads of wild animals, I mean that's disgusting as well, isn't it? Really, to go out and bag a lion or a gazelle or something just to say I just for sport. That's horrendous. That is.
So maybe that really highlights our 2 positions quite well, I think, because I think we both agree we shouldn't do it if it's not necessary. And I guess my position would be is it's always unnecessary, which I appreciate. We've been going around a bit. I appreciate you've presented alternatives to that view. But all right, well, hey, my first conversation with the wolf. I really appreciate everyone who's joined us and who's stuck around. I will be doing a summary video probably to try to compress this into kind of 5 or 10 minutes. We'll see how I do with that. Right. Compressing 2 hours down, but I'll do my best. And Troy, honestly, thank you for coming and having the conversation. I think it's got me thinking about some interesting topics here tonight. Definitely, and I hope the same's true for you because yeah, I think this is definitely better than a text-based comment section on YouTube.
Oh yeah, you'd never. Yeah,
we can agree on that too.
It would have been a lot of words, wouldn't it? But it would have been a lot of comments.
Our fingers would be cramping.
Yeah, definitely. I think my grammatical errors would be increasing. But yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I've enjoyed the exchange, and so maybe we can do it again sometime when
Yeah,
we've kind of digested what today's conversation may be a bit
yeah, that
more.
sounds great, Troy. And I know I like to listen to these things back and let them ferment. So it'll be interesting to see, like in a few days' time, what we each think of it. So
But
yeah,
yeah, well, I've noticed that as the lights faded and I'm now relying on artificial light, that my mouth is moving all on its own. It's not staying still. I'm not chewing gum. It's just I don't know. The camera isn't sure what my mouth is doing, so it's jittering around all over the place, even when I'm not speaking, which is quite
I thought
interesting.
you were trying to intimidate me with with your wolf teeth.
Well, I don't think I've got very intimidating fangs, have I? I don't.
There's definitely some fangs. Yeah,
Oh, that's good.
so some canines going on there. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
thank you,
Well,
everyone. I'll see you backstage here in a moment, Troy. But
okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
thank you everybody for joining us, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks and good night.
To be a guest on my next live stream, email me at veganinteractions@gmail.com or message me on Facebook. We can explore animal advocacy strategies, or I'm happy to respond to questions about veganism too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.